Welcome along to the deep dive. This is where we really try and get beneath the surface of information to find what matters for you. And today, well, it's a bit different. We're taking an intriguing journey, not into, the usual research paper or article. We're actually exploring an imaginative concept. It comes from a source called the Gatesian Chronicle, which kind of pushes the boundaries a bit, our focus, something described within it called the Hidden Diary. It's pitched as this fictional personal account from Bill Gates. Imagine funding it decades from now, like a private journal covering his whole life, looking back. Pretty fascinating idea.
Oh, it's a remarkable premise, isn't it? Really gets you thinking. And just to be super clear up front, we're not looking at a real diary. What we're digging into is the description of this fictional diary, as it's laid out in the Gatesian Chronicle. So it's less about facts and more about the intellectual exercise. What would a diary like that promise to tell us? It's this chance to ponder the inner world, the private reflections of someone who's had such a massive impact.
Right. So that's our mission for this deep dive. To unpack what this fictional diary is supposed to contain, according to the Chronicle. What kinds of insights, what revelations, we're sort of imagining. Okay, what untold stories might pop up? How would his personal life, his relationships, how would they look through his own private words? And crucially, what would he really think about that constant challenge, balancing family, philanthropy, and of course his passion for technology? That's a huge one.
It really is.
Yeah.
And, even though the diary itself is fictional, exploring the idea of it is incredibly valuable. It gives us this unique angle, doesn't it, to think about how complex public figures really are. It lets us kind of peek behind the usual polished stories and consider those universal human things, juggling commitments, dealing with passions, making choices, even when it's all magnified on a global stage. It's about trying to see the person behind the legend, I suppose.
Okay, let's start right there with that core theme the Chronicle highlights. His reflections on balancing family, philanthropy, and his passion for technology. We all know the public story, right? Microsoft co-founder, tech visionary, then this huge shift into global philanthropy. But what might an entry in this fictional diary actually say? Something specific that shows the internal juggling act. Because it's got to be more than just managing a schedule, hasn't it? It's about the emotional stuff, the mental trade-off.
Exactly. That word balancing, for someone with his kind of influence, it implies this constant dynamic tension. You can imagine maybe an entry from the early Microsoft days, something scribbled late at night about cracking a tough bug. But then maybe a fleeting thought right after, like, oh, I missed the kid's school event again, Or maybe later in life, a reflection on getting really bogged down by, bureaucratic red tape in some philanthropic project and feeling that almost primal urge to just get in there and, debug the system himself.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Which is such a contrast to the direct, hands-on coding days. So these entries, they wouldn't just list events. They'd capture the energy, the emotional, the intellectual energy poured into each area. And they'd reveal the personal cost, maybe, but also the immense satisfaction he got from each part of his life.
That's where the real meat is, isn't it? And think about the huge shifts over time. Early Microsoft, driven by that intense passion for technology. Then the pivot to philanthropy. A diary would, you'd assume, map that journey. It would capture the why, the internal discussions he had with himself. Like, how do you go from building operating systems to trying to wipe out diseases and still get that same buzz, that same feeling of making a difference? This diary promises that inside story, maybe even moments where he wasn't sure or times of just absolute conviction.
And if you step back and look at the bigger picture, these imagined diary entries would probably show this ongoing internal conversation about impact itself. It was the bigger impact, the software that changed how millions worked, or the health initiative that saved millions of lives. It would really highlight that complex dance between, personal drive and this growing sense of global duty.
Yeah.
What's really fascinating is how his definition of passion might have changed, from the beauty of code logic to the messy systems of global health, but all seen through his own personal view of what making a difference actually means. It's not just what he did, but how he felt doing it, day in, day out.
Okay, and that naturally leads us into the whole idea of personal life that the Chronicle says this diary reveals. We usually see famous people through these very controlled, curated images, right? But a diary, well, its whole point is that it's not filtered. It's where the public mask, if you want to call it that, comes off. So what kind of things about his personal life might actually surprise us? Maybe not big scandals, but, I don't know, ordinary details, things that, looking back, show you something deeper about his character, or quiet moments nobody knew about.
That contrast is key, isn't it? Public persona versus private self. The diary could capture maybe moments of just quiet time, revealing hobbies or intellectual interests completely separate from his main work, or even just simple frustrations struggling with a home repair project maybe, things that make him relatable.
Right, grounded.
Scary.
Imagine reading a passage where he's just enjoying a particular book or wrestling with some minor everyday problem, and then realizing this was written on the same day he was dealing with, some massive global policy issue. These aren't huge secrets, but they add texture, don't they? They remind you that even massively influential people deal with the everyday stuff. The private challenges mentioned might not be failures, but just small personal obstacles that reveal his persistence or maybe his sense of humor.
Yeah, that kind of depth, that human element, would be gold. Which takes us to relationships.
Mm.
And the Chronicle suggests this isn't just about famous colleagues or world leaders. A diary would presumably get into the really close connections. Family, close friends, maybe mentors, even rivals. How would those relationships come across differently in a private diary versus, say, an official biography?
Hmm.
There's that raw honesty, maybe a vulnerability that only a journal really allows for, charting how connections change over decades. Yes, definitely. A diary would offer his completely subjective view on those dynamics without worrying about public perception. It could reveal the little details of a connection, how a friendship evolved, or maybe moments of real tension or disagreement. All from his perspective. For instance, you might find really candid thoughts about the sheer intensity of working with people at Microsoft in the early days, showing not just the amazing ideas, but maybe the arguments, the friction, alongside the incredible trust needed.
Sure.
Or, really heartfelt entry about a family event, expressing pride maybe, but mixed with that constant pull of a demanding career, that guilt perhaps.
Yeah.
It would give us the inner story of how these interactions, family, colleagues, whoever, actually shaped his thinking, his decisions, how he processed them emotionally.
Okay, and this is where it gets really interesting for me. The untold stories.
Mhm.
That phrase from the Gazan Chronicle suggests stuff that goes beyond the public record. But maybe it's not about discovering completely new events, but understanding the meaning or the emotional weight behind things we thought we knew.
Hmm.
For someone like Bill Gates, whose life has been documented so much, what kinds of untold stories could a private diary realistically reveal?
That's where we get into slightly deeper territory, I think. An untold story in this context might be the raw feelings surrounding a decision we all know about, like, say, the actual anxieties and hopes just before launching Windows 95, or the internal back and forth he went through before committing everything to the foundation.
Ah, okay. The inner monologue.
Precisely. It could be the details of some quiet moment of frustration that actually sparked a major strategic change later on. Or maybe a personal insight he got from a private chat with someone, something that completely shifted how he saw a problem. These aren't necessarily, bombshell secrets. They're the crucial internal narratives, the story behind the story. They help explain why he did things, filling in those emotional and motivational blanks in the public timeline.
So less about scandal, more about just the sheer complexity of a lived life. The real story isn't just the list of events, it's the feelings, the doubts, the small realizations or struggles that, when you look back, change how you see the whole picture. This hidden diary, then, would give us that really personal, nuanced viewpoint on how a global figure was formed. It sounds like it would be a treasure trove of the private thoughts that drove the public actions. It really would, wouldn't it?
That's exactly right. And if you link that to the bigger picture, it just highlights how much of anyone's life, especially someone under that kind of spotlight, stays hidden from view. The diary offers the ultimate subjective viewpoint. It lets us try to understand the world through his eyes, his mind. It would presumably show his thinking evolving, the moments of self-discovery, the personal beliefs that steered him through massive challenges. These untold stories are like the connective tissue between the big public events. They reveal the ongoing journey of self and purpose. It would be this profound record of that intricate interplay between someone's inner world and their external impact. A really unique perspective on how a life of that magnitude was navigated, personally.
And that impact is, of course, what we mostly see. But this diary, this fictional concept from the Gazan Chronicle, it promises to show us the deep roots of it all. The process of being Bill Gates, maybe, not just the final product. Well, as we start to wrap up this deep dive, it's been genuinely fascinating just exploring this idea, this concept of the hidden diary from the Gazan Chronicle. We've really focused on what the description of this fictional account suggests it would unveil about such a major figure. using that description as our map, really.
Yeah, and the description really points towards shedding light on that personal life, relationships, and untold stories angle, offering a human side that's often hard to grasp from the outside. It promises those deep insights into his own reflections on balancing family, philanthropy, and his passion for technology. That constant juggling act. It really underlines how every public figure has this rich, complex, private world behind them full of choices, trade-offs, and, unique inner rewards.
So, thinking about all that, here's a final thought for you, something to maybe mull over. If your own hidden diary, full of your most private reflections, your real thoughts and feelings, was found decades from now, what specific untold stories about your life, your relationships, or maybe your own efforts to balance different passions and responsibilities, what would it reveal about you?
Hmm. That's a powerful question. And just to build on that, think about how this whole fictional diary idea maybe deepens our appreciation for the hidden complexities behind everyone's public face. It sort of encourages us to recognize that universal human experience, making choices, juggling different parts of life, that quiet, constant internal dialogue that shapes us all. It's really an invitation, isn't it, to
Yeah.
reflect on your own unique journey and the hidden depths within it, knowing that everyone, no matter their public status, carries a whole universe of unspoken stories inside.